our interviewee today, Szuplat. Szuplat is an award-winning author, speaker, and trainer whose keynote presentations and workshops empower audiences with the communication skills he learned as one of President Barack Obama's longest-serving White House speechwriters. He crafted nearly 500 speeches on critical global issues and traveled to over 40 countries. His book, Say It Well, became a bestseller, teaching people how to speak clearly and confidently. Today, Mr. Szuplat runs his own firm, Global Voices Communications, helping leaders in politics, business, NGOs, philanthropy, and entertainment inspire audiences around the world. As a keynote speaker and trainer, he takes the audience on a journey behind the scenes of the White House and shares the skills that can help anyone become a better speaker, communicator, and leader. He also teaches political speechwriting as an adjunct professor at American University's School of Public Affairs.
Hey there, my name is Terry Szuplat. I was a speechwriter for President Obama at the White House for almost the full 8 years that he was president. I've been a speechwriter and a communication strategist for almost 30 years. I've been working with leaders in government, politics, business, entertainment, philanthropy, advocacy. I help people find their voice, tell their story, connect with and inspire audiences, and excited to be with you guys today.
Thank you so much for joining us here today. So what does your career as a speechwriter look like?
So it's sort of how I got started and how I became a speechwriter. Well, I was growing up in elementary school, high school, college. I was always fascinated with government, history, politics, and public affairs, what was going on in the news. Growing up, I thought maybe I want to be a journalist, cover the news. But I really wanted to be in Washington, D.C., where all the action is. So I came to American University in Washington, D.C. And one of the great things about being in a city like Washington is that there's tons of opportunities, incredible opportunities to do internships. So not to just study what you're interested in, but to actually go out there and try it before you build a whole career on it, to find out what you like. And so one year I was an intern at my senator's office on Capitol Hill. Another time I studied abroad in England, in London, and I got an internship at the British Parliament, which is pretty fascinating, exciting. My senior year in college, I got an internship at the White House, and I was assigned to the speechwriters for the president. So as a college senior, I was able to watch presidential speechwriters do their job and thought, wow, that'd be an incredible thing to do someday. It brings together all my interests and politics, history, government, public affairs, and I enjoy writing. So what better place to be? So I think that's probably where I first got the sense of then maybe this is something I'd like to do with my life. But a lot of people don't realize that speechwriting is a career, that you can actually make a career doing it. Again, not just in government, but in politics and all sorts of different places. And a few years later, I got my first speechwriting job for our Secretary of Defense. So I worked at the Pentagon for a few years, and I worked up on Capitol Hill for a few years after that, writing for a member of Congress, writing for one of our Senate committees. And then I went into business for myself, and eventually around 2008, I got connected with the Obama campaign and his speechwriters. And when he won, they asked me if I wanted to join the team. So then I became a speechwriter for the president for 8 years.
What do you do on a day-to-day basis as a speechwriter?
So as a speechwriter, particularly at the White House for the president, it's your job to, prepare the scripts, the speeches that the president's going to go out and deliver. And so on any given day, we would maybe get to the White House around, 7:30, 8 in the morning. And the great thing about being a speechwriter, at least from my perspective, was I didn't have to go to tons of meetings all day. I got to really focus on researching and writing the president's speeches. And so, I was judged, and I was, my performance was based on the quality of the speeches that I had to turn in. And so it's like, you've all written essays for school. I would be basically writing essays every day, all day. And we would be writing for trips coming up, or visits of foreign leaders coming up, or policy announcements. Sometimes we could write these speeches in, maybe take a few hours. Sometimes it would take a few weeks. Some of the really big ones, we might work on them for more than a month or so. And so at any given day, we would be maybe putting the finishing touches on the speech for that day. We'd be doing some edits to the speech for tomorrow. We'd be writing the speech for later in the week. And maybe we'd be just starting to research the speech for a week or two down the line. So at any given moment, we'd be working on multiple speeches, but different stages. And, all the same steps that you do in a paper for school, we do with a speech, right? We do the research, we do outlining, we have our citations, we want to make sure our facts are correct. We write a draft, we share the draft with our speechwriting colleagues. Then we share the draft with people across the White House, maybe across the government. A day or two before the speech, we would send it up to the president for the president to review. And up there at night, y'all have homework, right? You do homework all the time. Well, presidents get homework too, and he gets a big, thick binder of all his speeches and memos and decisions that he needs to make for the next day. And so up there in his residence at night, he'd edit the speeches and he'd send them back to us the next day, and we'd make his edits. So it would depend. And then sometimes we did a lot of foreign travels, a lot of trips around the country with the president, trips around the world with the president. We'd fly on Air Force One, fly on his helicopter with him, making those edits. And it was really exciting. It was an incredible way to see the world. So again, if you're interested in government and politics and history and other countries, it's a great career to have.
So when you say we, I understand you work with like other speechwriters on the team, but how exactly is the work distributed? Do you all work on like one speech together, or is it like everybody has their own speech to work on?
Yes and yes. So the way it works is you get assigned a speech, or we look at the schedule, we see what's coming up. And if there's something you're really excited about, you really want to work on, you can put your hand up and say, I'd like to be the speechwriter for that. Or if it's something nobody wanted to do, everyone would look down at the floor and look down at their shoes until someone would have to get picked to do it. But you're the lead. Can you imagine? I'm sure you've done this, right? You've had to write essays for school. It's hard to write. It's hard to write an essay. It can be even harder if imagine 2 or 3 of you trying to write one essay together. I mean, how do you do that? One person, you can't have one person write the beginning, one person write the middle, one person write the end. It's not all going to sound right. And how do you write the middle if you don't know what's been said in the beginning? So it would be really hard we didn't break speeches up, but so we had one person in charge of the research and the writing and the drafting. But then once that one person did it, they would, circulate it and share it with the rest of our team. And we would get a chance to offer edits. It would be up to the person whether or not to make the edits. But again, even that's one person trying to decide. So yeah, we have there's a phrase you hear a lot in the business world and the government world of writing by committee, where you have lots of people trying to write one thing, or they put something in a Google Doc and everyone's editing it. I mean, those don't usually turn out so well. You hear like dozens of different voices, dozens of different brains working on one thing. You have to have one person in charge. You have to have one person making sure that it's consistent and coherent, and that the beginning makes sense with the end and they don't contradict each other. So, but yeah, it's sort of, and then in your response, at least the way we did it, we were responsible for it all the way to the very end. If people sent edits, we have to make the edits. If people sent fact checks and we got something wrong, it was our responsibility to fix it and make it right. And then one of the last steps of the whole process, after the president was done with it, it was time for the speech to be finalized. And maybe it just needed to be printed out and put in a binder so the president could have it on the podium, or maybe it was going to go in the teleprompter, right? You've all seen those pieces of glass sometimes on the, and to us in the audience, they just look like 2 pieces of glass. But to the president, it's the words of the speech are moving up the glass so that the president can read it and look out at the audience. We were responsible for making sure that the speech got to the teleprompter. So yeah, one person in charge from beginning to end. And in fact, our name would be on the speech, so that the president had a problem with it, he knew who to call.
When you start writing a speech, what information are you given? Is it just the topic of what you're writing the speech for, or the opinions or point of view of who you're writing the speech for?
It really depends. Sometimes you might have a speech where, one of the one of the kinds of speeches that we had to write for the president was when the president gives the Medal of Honor to someone from the military. And so they've done something extraordinary, brave, heroic, and they're receiving the Medal of Honor for it. And so we would get a huge sort of packet of information from the military about what they did and the battle and they fought and everything that happened. And we'd have to sift through that and try as best we can to come up with the best way to tell that story in 10 to 15 minutes. Other times we received almost nothing. Sometimes saying, oh, the president, it was up to us to do the research. So if a team wins the Super Bowl or NBA championship, so we'd have to do our own research and figure out what the best story was. Sometimes if, there's a lot of really smart people in the White House and across the government. So if we're going to, speak about, if the president was going to speak about, I don't know, Europe, we'd work with our Europe experts and they would give us some ideas and give us some material, make sure that we had sort of the raw material correct. But it's really, it's up to the speechwriters to actually put it into the voice and the words of the president. So yeah, sometimes we'd have a lot of information, almost too much information. Sometimes we'd have nothing. We'd like a little bit more. Just, imagine if one of you had to write the essay, but someone else had to do the research. It's a hard thing it's a hard collaboration. But we were never totally alone working on it. We had an amazing team to work with behind us.
So did your team write politically geared speeches as well, or just speeches like at events or such like that?
Yeah, so there's actually rules in government as to who can do political work and who can't. And so because the idea is we don't want a president ever to use all the resources of the government, the people, the money to try to serve their own narrow political interests. So there are rules in place, and I was actually one of the people who was prohibited from doing political work. I was not allowed to, if the president was going to go out and give a political rally or a political speech, I wasn't allowed to work on that. I had one of our colleagues was allowed to do that. So yeah, because I worked in the space around national security, foreign affairs, I was legally, it was against the law for me to be doing explicit, what we call partisan work. So, President Obama is a Democrat. So if in the speech he was going to go out there and say, we Democrats need to do X, Y, and Z, I couldn't work on a speech like that. So yeah, it's a very clear division of labor. There's rules and laws in place, and you can get in trouble if you violate them.
That was a great insight. We didn't know about that. So digging deeper into what you said in your introduction, what specific education did you take to get to where you are today?
Sure. So, like I said, I was always interested in government and history and politics. So, in high school, I took, AP history. I was involved in student government. I did not write for the student newspaper in high school, but we did have a student TV news program. So I was part of that, where we would write scripts and deliver the news, kind of like a speech. And we would go out with cameras and we'd film the sports teams. And so we were kind of journalists for our high school, TV journalists for our high school. So I did that. And then in college, I majored in two things. Well, I majored in political science. That was my major. And I had a minor. So I did some coursework around justice issues. So sort of like pre-law. I thought maybe I'd go to law school. But I focused on political science, and I was very interested in presidential rhetoric, so I wrote lots of papers about presidential speeches. I did not, a lot of people continue on after college. They go to graduate school or law school or medical school or I did not. I was interested in becoming a lawyer, but I actually didn't get in anywhere. So there's a lesson. I was, of course, really disappointed at the time. I had dreams of going to law school and being a lawyer and going to the Supreme Court and being a lawyer that argues cases in the Supreme Court, but I didn't do so well on the tests for law school. They're called LSATs, and I didn't do so well. And I was applying to, I had mediocre scores, and I applied to the top law schools in the country. So I would, I didn't quite match. But it was a good thing, because when I didn't get in, that's when I really started getting involved in speechwriting, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful career. So, things don't always work out the way we think they're going to. We don't always get into the schools we think. We don't always get in, it's going to happen, and it can be really hard when it does happen, but there's so many things to do out there. So, I hope you all, you work hard. You obviously focus on your career. Some places you'll get in, some places you won't. Some jobs you'll get, some you won't. And that's just life. But it's not because you're not a good person. It's not because you're not smart. You are. It's just that there's hundreds of people for one slot. Not everybody gets it. Most people don't. So keep your head up and go for the next thing. And I'm glad I didn't give up. If I had let it get to me, I might not have had the exciting career that I did.
That was really inspirational to hear. What about speech writing, or like writing for writing for government, stuck to you to continue in that career?
Yeah, well, I think I love the issues. It's a way to serve your country and be involved in government, but not necessarily be sort of deep within all the weeds and spend, hours and hours a day discussing policy. With speechwriting, I always sort of compared it to, we get to write the music, kind of the big, the theme music for the presidency, or everyone else they have to design what the policy is and come up with the policy. We get to tell the big story, and we can help the American people understand what the president's trying to do. One of the things I love most about it is, I always think about a speech as not just, the one person speaking words. I think of it as an experience between the speaker and the audience. So, you've all been to speeches, you've been to movies and plays and performances and concerts. When there's someone up on the stage, whether they're speaking or singing or playing music, and you're in the audience, you feel connected to them. You feel like you're having an experience with them, and like it's what a great, right? You're at a concert or something, you just feel like you're part of something. You're connected to the people around you. You're connected to the person who's on stage. And so I love helping create that experience for the speaker, for the audience, and for what they feel together. And it's almost like being kind of like a director in a movie or a playwright. You get to sit back days and weeks before and think, okay, how do I want that scene to go? How do I want the person to come out on stage? What should they say to get the crowd excited? What should their opening song be? What's the song that's going to get everybody really excited? So, okay, so what's the opening of the speech? Or, what's the second song that really kind of keeps up the momentum? So I think of speeches like a performance, like an experience. And as the speechwriter, you get to create all that and work with we got to work with the president to try to create all that. So at the White House, for example, it would be, what do we want? Where do we want the speech to be? We would sometimes get a say in that. What do we want the audience to be? What do we want the stage to look like? Do we want a bunch of flags? Do we want a bunch of young people sitting there with the president? And do we want him to interact with the audience, and how to do that? And so what do we want the big conclusion and finale to be? Just like a great concert ends with a great song, well, a great speech ends with a great ending, or maybe a great story. So to be able to create that experience is really exciting.
It's so amazing that y'all not only get to write the speech, but also design the whole experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun too. It's really neat. And then when, some speechwriters don't like to be there when the speech is given, they find it too nerve-wracking. They've worked really hard, and they're so stressed out, they can't bear to be in the room, especially if it doesn't go well. But I loved going to it because, I'd been all by myself in my office. So in the West Wing, where our office was, we were in an office in the basement right below the Oval Office, and we had no windows. and it was kind of like being in a submarine a little bit. And so we'd be, working on that speech for, again, days or weeks and thinking about it and imagining it in our head. And so then I really wanted to be there to see, did it all work? Did the play go the way I imagined it in my head? And so I'd like to sit, some people like sit in the back and look at the president, but I didn't care about that because I could always watch the video later. I didn't need to watch the president. I really wanted to watch the audience. So I would sit in the front off to the side so that I could look back at the audience. I wanted to see whether they were actually having the experience that I imagined they would. Or were they laughing? Were they listening? Were they nodding along? Were they cheering? Were they clapping? Were they paying attention? Were they checking their watch? And I wanted to see whether they were having that experience, and so that we could, learn from it and do even better next time. So it's a lot of fun.
Do you decide the way the speech is delivered, or does the president decide that?
Well, part of it goes into how you write it, of course. You're responsible for writing the words that are on the page. But yeah, in the end, it's up to the president to decide exactly how he's going to deliver it, and that can depend on how he's feeling that day, how the audience is reacting to it. But President Obama was very, very good at that. Some people often ask, did we write in little stage directions for him, like smile or laugh or look to your left, look to your right, or point, or, slow down, speed up, or, all that stuff. I do that for other clients sometimes, but I certainly never did that for President Obama because he was very good at it. And actually, it's a really important lesson. People think, oh, well, he's Barack Obama. He's really good. I'll never be that good. Well, he wasn't he wasn't as good as that always either. He was young once. And, I wrote a book about public speaking. And in the book, I tell a story that when President Obama was in his 20s and he was just starting out in his career and he had to give a speech one day and he didn't prepare. He didn't write anything down. He decided he's just going to wing it. He was sort of a little overconfident that day, and it didn't go so well. He got nervous. He lost his train of thought. He started sweating and stammering, and he was he felt kind of embarrassed about it. And I tell people that because I want them to know that the person you see, if you see someone being a great public speaker, it's because they've worked at it really hard over many, many years. And, and Barack Obama had to work at it too. So in the book, I talk about all the different ways that he worked to become a better speaker. And because we can all, being able to speak clearly with a compelling message, a way that excites your audience, it's a really important skill to have no matter what you do in your life. Whatever career you choose, you have to be a good communicator. And so he worked at it, he got better, and so can we.
Have you ever had a client who you feel didn't quite do justice to the speech you wrote?
Oh, yeah, lots of times. I mean, when you write something, you're sort of hearing it in your head. You're kind of hearing the voice of how you think it should be, how you think it should come out. And, sometime, with President Obama, he'd almost always do it. I mean, he sort of take it to the next level, even better than what you thought in your head. But yeah, sometimes I've had clients where they just, they haven't put in the work. It's not that they're not great speakers, it's that they haven't put in the work yet. They haven't really been at it for years and they haven't practiced a lot. And so maybe the line doesn't it's supposed to be a big, powerful, exciting line that's delivered with emphasis, and it just kind of falls out of their mouth, or they garble a line, or they mispronounce something. Or they just, it just doesn't come out. And, usually if that's an opportunity to keep getting better, to keep practicing. Again, people say, oh, Barack Obama is a naturally gifted speaker. No, he's actually not. I don't think he worked really hard at it to get better same way when you go to a concert, do you think, you may like, do you think Taylor Swift naturally gifted? Maybe not, but she sure has worked really hard at it for many, many years. Someone who knows how to play an instrument really well. They didn't just pick up the instrument when they were 4 and start playing it. They had to practice and train and learn and get better. and put in tons of work. A great athlete, same thing, right? They just didn't, jump out there and start winning medals. They trained for years. So you got to put in the work. And it's the same with public speaking. So when someone doesn't, if they want to keep giving more speeches, then, and they're not so great, that means we've got to train more. Like running a race, right? You want to go faster, train harder. You want to speak better, train harder.
What makes a speech a good speech? Like, what about the delivery and about the writing makes a speech a good speech?
Right. So we always think about speeches and presentations as having two big parts. One is the content, what you actually write, what you actually say, and then there's how you say it, how you deliver it, and you need both. So sometimes you have, kind of to your question a few minutes ago, you might have a great script and a speech, but so the content's good, but they don't deliver it well, so it doesn't come out so great. Or you might have a great speaker, someone who's dynamic and they can, run around the stage and they're waving their hands and they're exciting and they're dynamic, but they're actually not saying anything particularly interesting or insightful. And I'm sure you've heard people like that too. Like they're full of passion, but they're just not, they say there's no there. There's like, you dig down deep, like, wow, they didn't actually say anything new or interesting or fresh or substantive. And so really, I think the best speakers, the best communicators have both. You have a great message and you deliver it well. And, on the first one, having a great message, I think it's avoiding, you've heard avoiding cliches, avoiding just things you've heard 100 times. We've all been at events or church or synagogue or temple or whatever. And, maybe it's a very interesting sermon or it's not, or you go to school and the teacher is very interesting that day, or they're not. Usually when they're not, it's because they're just saying things you've heard over and over again. So something that's new and interesting and not a cliche and that your audience hasn't heard 100 times. And another great way is take a position on something. Say something, like pick an issue and have an opinion about it. Maybe it's climate change. Maybe you feel really strongly about climate change. So speak about that. Your presentation is going to be so much better when people talk about the things they care about most and when they take a position. And then, of course, on the delivery, to try to remember that, our bodies in a way can help convey our message. So if we're excited about something, but we're just sort of standing there with our shoulders down and our arms by our side, it doesn't look like you're very excited about it. You want to move your hands. You want to make points with your hands. You want to, bring the audience in, with your body. So I think all of it, and I think one of the reasons that Barack Obama is considered one of the great communicators is because he did all that. He didn't want to be, he told me once, he didn't want to be a normal politician. He didn't want to just say the same thing that all the other politicians are saying. And so, which is a lot of times we Americans feel that, like, wow, this politician's just telling me the same thing I've heard from a bunch of other politicians. But I think with a Barack Obama speech, you always knew you were going to get something fresh and interesting, and maybe he's going to try to. He used to be a lawyer. He taught law at a university, so he was really always trying to make an interesting, new argument that might help people understand a problem better. So, which is why if to be a good communicator, you have to be a good researcher. You have to be a clear thinker. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to do your work. Literally do your homework, so that you actually know what you're talking about.
What are some of your most challenging or favorite moments in writing a speech?
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely the most challenging moments were when we had to write a speech for the president after something bad happening, a natural disaster, an accident, a terrorist attack, a shooting of some kind, when the president had to go out and be what they call, the consoler in chief. So the president has many jobs. But one of them is to help the country get through hard times. And so having to work on those speeches was always very difficult because something terrible had happened and people had been hurt or somehow, and people were grieving. And it was always very hard to kind of find the right words to do that, because the president was there to, hopefully help guide the country through those difficult moments. So those were always the most challenging ones, definitely. And then the ones that were the most, exciting to work on were, I mean, for me, or for most fulfilling, is when, the opposite, when we got to talk about something good or someone who had done something important. So the Medal of Honor ceremonies were always very, very nice when we get to honor somebody or give an award to someone for being a great athlete or a great musician or a great performer. Yeah, so it was sort of the hardest ones were the hardest moments, and the most exciting ones were when we could write speeches full of joy and excitement and happiness.
Is there one specific speech that you look back on and cherish?
Yes, actually. Well, there's when we were at the end of the Obama administration, the White House asked each of us, what's the speech that means the most to you? And so each person mentioned their one speech. And what was interesting about it was that they weren't necessarily the most famous speeches. They were the speeches, that meant the most to us, and usually because there was a personal connection. And so people can go online and if you Google Obama's speechwriters' favorite speeches, it's a list of all of the speeches that meant the most to us. And the one that I picked for that was the speech the president gave after the Boston Marathon was bombed years ago. And so I was born in Boston. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I knew a lot of people who were really, sad and hurting because of that. And so to be able to work on the speech with the president, where he went to Boston and tried to, again, speak to the people of that city and the state and the country about what had happened and how we can get through it as Americans together. It meant a lot to me to be able to work on that, because I know it meant a lot to my family and my friends and communities that I care a lot about. And that's true for among all the speechwriters. We all sort of, the ones that are most meaningful to us are the ones where we got to sort of write for our family and friends.
Thank you for sharing. That was really touching. So how do you maintain a good work-life balance?
Yeah, that's really hard. And the word balance is one that I think always is interesting, because it almost implies equal. And that's really hard to do when you're if you have a job that's 40 hours a week or more. Well, that's 40 hours a week or more that you are not spending with your family and your friends. I mean, you were at work. You're either at work or you're home. And even when you're at home these days, people are bothering you on your cell phone. I mean, so people expect you to be available all the time, which is not so great. It's one of the ways that I tried to do it at the White House. Well, I was very lucky. When I was working on that job, my wife and I had, our children. We have 2 children, a son and a daughter. And when I started working at the White House, I think they were about 4 and 3 years old. They were little. And so that meant, number one, that meant a lot of the parenting duties fell disproportionately on my wife for many years. So that wasn't really fair to her. And at the same time, I told my colleagues at the White House that, I am married and I have children. I would like to see them sometimes. So, if I can never see them, then I probably can't do this job very long, because that's not going to work. So if I have to be here till 8, 9, 10 o'clock every night, then, probably maybe do this job for a few months. I'm not going to be able to, my family, that's not going to work for my family. But we made a deal where I said, if I can maybe head out around 6:30 every day and, go home and have dinner with my family and put my kids to bed, and, I can always jump back on the computer all night and work a lot more hours if I need to, but I really need to see my wife and kids for at least a few hours a day. If I can do that, then I could do this job for years. I can stick around to the end. And that's what we did. So I was very lucky to have, most importantly, my wife, who helped in this way, in a way that oftentimes that I couldn't. And I was very lucky to have colleagues who understood. And not everybody gets that. I realize that. And so, but one of the things to look for in a job, in a career, is do they respect the fact that you might have a family? Not everyone has not everyone's married, and that's fine. Not everyone has kids, and that's fine. But if you do, then you have to make sure there's time for everybody.
How do you see the career of speechwriting evolving, especially with AI being used more often?
Yeah, that's a question I get all the time. And clearly, AI is going to just keep taking over more and more of our lives and more jobs. And there's a lot of people whose jobs will, change a lot. People use AI more in their job. Hopefully it saves them time. And then there'll be some jobs that just go away because of AI. AI will do the job and they won't hire humans. But I hope, remember everything I was talking about before about a great speech or a great presentation being an experience between the audience and the person. Well, just like I hope Taylor Swift never goes out there and starts just singing songs written by AI, I hope speakers don't just go out there and give presentations written by AI, because that's not what we want. Right? I always tell people, you're a human being speaking. Your audience is human beings. They want a human connection. They do not want a script or a speech or a song or a play written by AI. They want a human connection. They want to know what's in your heart, what's in your head. They want to connect with you. And this is a good actually lesson for as you do your speeches, papers and stuff. So, if you want to use AI to do research and find quotes and get statistics and maybe help you come up with an outline or edit or ideas, that's great. That's fine. That's wonderful. That saves you so much time. If you write 100 words and you really only need 50 words, ask it to cut it in half, see what it does for you. You still got to check it. But so as they say as a thought partner, right? As a partner, sure. But when it comes time to actually write out what you want to say, don't ever turn that over to a machine. Just don't, because your audience, your teacher, your friends, your family, whatever, they want to hear you. They want to know what's in your heart. So, if you ever have to go to a funeral and say something nice about your grandparents or someone you loved, or to, give a graduation speech, speak from your heart. Don't ever turn that. Don't ever give your, one of the things I tell people is that your voice and your experiences and the life that you've had and your thoughts, it's what makes you human. It's what makes you unique. And no machine can ever replicate that. And again, so I say, don't ever give your voice over to a bot.
Thank you. That's definitely something interesting to think about. So would you say speech writing is a career to consider?
No, don't do it. Yes, of course. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would say that if you're somebody who is interested in government and public service and policy and how government actually works, how it can make a difference in people's lives, if you're interested in history and why people, why we are the country we are, how to make it better, if any of that appeals to you, then speech writing is one of the great careers that you could consider, because you get to help, maybe it's not the president, but it could be a member of Congress, a senator, a congressperson. It could be a governor. It could be, think of the people in your hometown. It could be a mayor. It could be your city council. They all need help. Everyone has to get up and communicate. Or organizations that care about issues. They have to make sure that they're telling a really powerful, compelling story about what they care about. So it's a great way to, some people are interested in law, they'll become lawyers, they'll work in government that way. Some people are they like understanding how programs and policies work. So they really want to understand all the intricacies, and that's all really important. If you don't want to do those things, but you still want to be involved in government, this is a great way to serve. It's a great way to be involved in public service. And it's fun. And it's stressful, but it's fun too.
These were all the questions that we have for you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Monday to come talk with us. This is really enlightening, and speechwriting is not a career you hear about often.
That's
So
right.
it's to share with the world how exciting and interesting it is. Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you.
maybe we'll all work together someday. Maybe you'll be writing for a congressman or a senator or a governor or a president. So good luck in all your work, and maybe we'll be hearing your speeches someday.
Here are our takeaways from today's video. 1. Internships help you test drive careers before committing. Speechwriting involves researching, outlining, citing sources, fact-checking, drafting, feedback, and review. It's okay if you don't get exactly what you dreamed of. There's many other paths out there. A speech is a human connection between the audience and the speaker. Speechwriters shape the message like directors or playwrights. Everyone starts somewhere. Even admired professionals were once beginners. Speechwriters influence politics without being directly in the spotlight. Good communication is important in any job. Great speeches have fresh content and engaging delivery. AI can help organize but should never replace your voice and ideas.
Hey guys, hope you learned something new from this video. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Bye!